My name is Julia Anderson. I'm 31 years old. I never thought the day would come when my own existence would be treated like it never happened. But that's exactly what my parents did. They didn't just betray me. They erased me. Not emotionally, not silently, but legally, officially, from every single family record like I was a mistake they could delete. One morning I still existed in documents and history and bloodline, and by nightfall my name was gone. As if Julia Anderson was never born into that family empire. I grew up in a world made of glass towers, polished marble floors, and rules I was never allowed to question. My father built an empire that everyone respected, feared, and envied. My mother stood beside him like a queen who decided who was worthy and who wasn't, and from the beginning, I was never worthy enough. My brother was the future, the chosen one, the heir. I was just there, useful when needed, invisible when not. I learned early that love in my house wasn't given, it was assigned like a title. The first crack in my reality appeared on an ordinary evening when I was called to the family office. No explanation, no warning, just a cold summons that made my chest tighten the moment I saw their faces. My father didn't even look at me. My mother did, but not like a daughter, like a problem that had finally become inconvenient enough to solve. Then came the words that froze my blood. You are no longer part of this family structure. I didn't understand at first, until I saw the folder on the table, empty where my identity should have been. No records, no lineage, no trace, just absence. A carefully prepared erasure. That night, I stood outside the mansion gates holding a copy of a document that didn't recognize me anymore. The wind felt colder than anything I had ever known. And for the first time in my life, I understood something terrifyingly clear. I hadn't lost my place in the family. I had been completely removed from it, like I never existed at all. My hands were still shaking when I left the gates, but what shook me more was the silence that followed. No calls, no messages. Not even a warning from the people who raised me. It was as if the moment they signed those papers, I stopped existing in their world completely. I kept staring at the document again, hoping I had misunderstood it. But the truth didn't change. My identity had been wiped clean like ink washed off paper. And the most painful part wasn't the loss. It was how easily it was done. The next morning, I went back to the city office where the records were stored. I needed answers. I told them there had to be a mistake, that I belonged to that family file. But the clerk didn't even look surprised. She pulled up the system, turned the screen slightly toward me, and there it was. A blank space where my entire history used to be. No parents listed. No inheritance link. No legal connection. Just an empty line marked as removed by authorized request. My stomach dropped. Authorized. That word felt like a knife wrapped in respect. I went to a lawyer that same day, hoping this could be reversed. He looked uncomfortable before I even finished explaining. He said the documents were ironclad, signed at the highest level of authority tied to the empire. Whoever did it didn't just erase me emotionally. They used power, money, and influence to make it permanent. I remember laughing once in disbelief, because the alternative was accepting that my own family had planned my disappearance like a business decision. The lawyer didn't laugh back. Days turned into a blur. I tried calling every number I knew, every connection I had grown up with. One by one, doors closed. Some didn't even pick up. Others acted like they had never met me. It was worse than rejection. It was collective amnesia forced by fear. I realized then that the empire my family built wasn't just wealth. It was control. And I was the only piece they had removed to keep it clean. That night, I sat alone in a small rented room far from everything I once called home. No luxury, no noise, no power, just me and the echo of being erased. But in that silence, something changed. Pain stopped being just pain. It started turning into something sharper. Something focused. If they wanted me gone from their records, then I would make sure they were remembered for what they did to me, not as powerful figures, not as respected names, but as the ones who tried to delete their own blood. I stopped chasing them after that, not because I gave up, but because I finally understood the game they were playing. This wasn't about family anymore, it was about control, image, and legacy. And in our world, truth didn't matter unless it threatened the empire. So I changed my approach. I started listening instead of shouting, watching instead of begging, learning how power actually moved behind closed doors. Slowly, I stopped being the daughter they erased and started becoming something they never expected. I took whatever work I could find at first, small roles in companies far removed from their influence. I needed distance, anonymity, and time. Every night, I studied financial reports, corporate structures, legal loopholes, anything connected to their empire. It was like dissecting a machine that once crushed me. The more I learned, the more I realized something unsettling. Their empire wasn't as untouchable as it looked. It was built on fragile alliances, hidden dependencies, and secrets carefully buried under reputation. One evening, I met someone who had once worked closely with my father's company. He didn't recognize me at first. That was the first time I felt something close to relief instead of pain. We talked for hours, and for the first time, I heard things no daughter was ever supposed to know. Deals that were never meant to be exposed. Names that were quietly removed from business history. And most importantly, a pattern. My family didn't just remove me. They had done it before to others who became inconvenient. That realization changed everything inside me. I wasn't an isolated mistake. I was part of a system that repeated itself, and if I stayed silent, it would continue. Something inside me hardened that day. Not anger, clarity. I didn't want sympathy anymore. I wanted exposure. Not revenge in the emotional sense, but truth in its most destructive form. The kind of truth that doesn't just hurt people. It dismantles everything they built. So I made my first move quietly. I started collecting everything: documents, records, conversations, financial trails. I didn't rush it. I couldn't afford to. Every piece I gathered felt like assembling a weapon they didn't know I was building. And the closer I got to the center of their empire again, the more I realized something chilling. They had no idea I wasn't gone. They thought I was erased. But I was still here, and I was learning how to come back differently. I didn't announce my return. I didn't call anyone. I didn't confront them. I simply positioned myself where I could see everything clearly without being seen. The empire my family built was preparing for its biggest public event of the year, a high-profile foundation gala that would gather investors, politicians, and media. On the surface, it was about charity and legacy. But underneath, it was a stage where reputations were polished and truths were buried deeper. And I knew this was where everything would collide. In the weeks leading up to the event, I worked quietly behind the scenes, ensuring I was no longer just a forgotten name in a system. I had managed to gain access through an alias, blending into the very structure they controlled. Every document I handled, every file I reviewed, brought me closer to the truth I had been assembling piece by piece. And then I found it the confirmation. My removal from the family records wasn't just emotional rejection. It was tied directly to a financial restructuring that protected assets from inheritance disputes. I wasn't erased by accident. I was removed for profit. The night of the gala arrived like a storm wrapped in elegance. Lights sparkled across the hall, laughter filled the air, and every smile was rehearsed for the cameras. My family stood at the center of it all, flawless and untouchable in appearance. My father spoke about legacy, my mother about unity, and my brother stood beside them like the perfect heir. Watching them, I felt something strange, not hatred anymore, but distance. Like I was looking at people who once had power over me, but no longer existed in the same reality I now understood. I stepped into the hall quietly, unnoticed at first. Dressed simply, holding nothing that would give away who I used to be to them. I watched as the speeches continued, as applause echoed, as lies were repeated so smoothly that even truth would hesitate to interrupt. Then the moment came, the point where I was ready to stop being invisible. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't create chaos. I simply activated what I had prepared. The truth, carefully documented, legally verified, and publicly traceable, began appearing on the screens meant for celebration. The room didn't explode immediately. At first, there was confusion, then silence. Then the shift slow, heavy, irreversible. Names, documents, and records that were supposed to stay buried were suddenly visible to everyone in that hall. The same system they used to erase me was now exposing them. I stood there watching as whispers spread like fire. And for the first time in my life, I saw my family not as powerful figures, but as people losing control of the story they thought they owned. The silence that followed wasn't normal silence. It was the kind that collapses a room from the inside. Guests stopped smiling, cameras lowered, and every eye slowly shifted toward the unfolding truth on the screens. My father's voice tried to interrupt the system, but it was already too late. Every document, every hidden transaction, every erased identity, including mine, was now visible to everyone he once controlled with silence. I stood at the edge of the hall, no longer invisible, no longer erased, just present in the only way that mattered now. My mother's face changed first. Not anger, fear. The kind that comes when control slips beyond recovery. My brother looked around like he was searching for someone to fix it, to reverse it, to make it disappear. But there was nothing left to fix. The empire they built on curated perfection was cracking in real time, exposed in front of the very people they spent years impressing. And for the first time, they weren't the ones in control of the narrative. They were inside it, trapped. Then my father saw me. Really saw me. Not as a name on a record, not as a problem to remove, but as a consequence standing quietly in the same room he once ruled without question. He stepped forward, trying to speak, trying to regain authority with the same tone that once silenced me. But his words didn't land the way they used to. The illusion was gone, and all that remained was the truth he had tried to bury standing in front of him, unshaken. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I didn't need to. Everything I wanted to say was already in the room, printed across every screen, whispered between every guest, and carried in every shocked expression. Instead, I simply reminded him of one thing he had forgotten when he erased me. Systems remember even when families don't. And what he tried to delete had only transformed into something stronger than silence exposure. When I finally turned to leave, no one stopped me. Not because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't. The empire was still standing, but it no longer felt untouchable. And I wasn't the girl who had once been removed from its records. I was the proof that erasure doesn't end a story. It only changes who gets to write the ending. Behind me, everything they built continued to fall into its own truth. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had disappeared. I felt like I had finally arrived.